How do we infuse emotional intelligence in our experience? So let's talk a little bit about that today. All right. Am I moving okay, Susan? Give me a thumbs up. Let me know if I'm moving. Awesome. Awesome. So what are we going to do today in our short time together? We're going to learn the difference between service and experience. We're also going to learn how to effectively communicate, because effective communication is the key to customer experience. We're going to talk about communication standards for an impactful customer experience. And then we're going to talk about how to handle conflict. Ooh, this is going to be a good one. Now, let me just say this. Conflict is a topic in and of itself. I'm actually infusing 3 topics today. I'm going to talk about customer experience. I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence, and I'm going to talk about conflict. Again, those are 3 separate topics in and of themselves, but I'm hoping that I can make sure I bring them together and show you how important it is if you're going to have an experience or create an experience for your customer, how important it is to have all 3 of these elements working for you. So let's continue. So when we talk about service and experience, now I want you to think about when you are going to a store. And normally, when we're looking for a customer service desk, if you will, why are we going there? Why are we looking for that? Can someone just kind of put in the chat why we be looking for a customer service desk? Anyone? Why would we be looking for a customer service desk? Well, let me give you the answer. Most likely because there's a problem that you're dealing with. You're dealing with a problem. So service is very reactive, whereas experience is very proactive. Experience says, wait a minute, I'm going to anticipate the customer's needs. This is why we see organizations putting Q&As on their websites, because they've heard the question so many times that they said, we're going to anticipate what the customer is wanting. We're going to anticipate what the customer needs. And we're going to put this Q&A sheet on our website to make sure that our customers know that we hear them, and we're going to provide the answers for them. So again, we want to make sure that we are anticipating the customer's needs. What is it the customer may want? Now, one of the analogies I like to use is I'm a foodie. I love good food. I love good experience. And if you've ever been to a 2-star restaurant versus a 5-star restaurant, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say this. So I have been to 2-star restaurants and I'm like, okay, we can do a little bit better here. And then I've been to 5-star restaurants where the food and the service is actually amazing. Actually, it's not even service, it's an experience. I remember visiting the Charleston in Baltimore. And if you've ever been to the Charleston, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When I arrived, the valet was already waiting for me. It was as if he knew I was coming. And so he helped me out of the car. And then the doorman opened the door for me. And when I got to the front desk, they said, do you have a reservation or the name for the reservation, please? And I gave them the name. And then they had someone to come and take me to the table. Now, this is just getting better and better, I'm thinking. I'm like, oh my goodness, I mean, this is good. This is good. They take me to the table and don't dare put your hand on the seat, because they pull the seat out for you and allow you to sit down. And don't touch anything, because they take the napkin and they actually put it over your lap. And then they ask you, what water do you prefer? Do you get me? I mean, 3 different types of water. There's like sparkling water, tap water, purified or filtered water. I mean, it was amazing. Versus when I go to a 2-star restaurant, it's a little different. They say, just find a seat, someone to be with you shortly. They bring out water. They don't know what kind of water I want. It's like, this is the way it is. And so the experience is very different. When you're working with your customers, are you creating an experience for them? Or are you saying, whatever I give you, that's what you're going to take? I want you to think about your own experiences. I want you to think about your 2-star restaurants versus your 5-star restaurant experiences. What made that experience so amazing that you just didn't want to leave? What made that experience so amazing that you remember it to this day? And ask yourself, what can I do to make sure that my customer is having that same experience with me? Now, understanding my audience today, I know that I have people who are not only working in businesses, but people who also own their own businesses. They're entrepreneurs, and I love that. They're business leaders and people who are, in sales or whatever the case may be. I want you to know that this topic is definitely something that is relatable in whatever position you're serving in. I want you to understand that the experience that you give your customer determines whether they're going to come back or not. So it is important that we take a step back, look at our processes, look at what we're doing and how we're doing it to ensure that customer feels like they are valued and you're providing the best possible experience to them that you can provide. So when we look at communication, which has a lot to do with the experience that we provide, one of the things that I strongly recommend is that we have a level of empathy for our customer. What is empathy? Well, empathy is sometimes confused with sympathy. People are like, oh, well, yeah, I'm empathetic. I'm empathetic. Not really. You're probably sympathetic. Because sympathy is feeling for you, while empathy is feeling with you. Empathy basically creates a space for people to feel however they want to feel without being judged. How many spaces do you wish were more like that? Oh my goodness, when people are actually taking time to hear what you have to say, instead of waiting for their turn to interject what they have to say. I love, again, analogies. And one of the things I think about when I'm looking to compare sympathy and empathy is imagine someone being out on the boat in the water and their boat is sinking and it's sinking pretty fast. If I was on the shore saying, oh my goodness, I hope they're okay, that would be sympathetic. I'm hoping that everything is going to be okay from afar. But empathy, I get in a boat, I go out to them and not only make sure that they're okay, but I'll actually get into a boat and make sure that the thing stops, the water stops coming in. I'm getting in it with them. Simply put, sympathy stands on the shore while empathy gets in the water. If you're going to listen to your customer, you got to make sure that you have an empathetic ear, that you are tuned in to what they're saying, to how they're saying it, and to some of you looking or watching their body language when they say it. When we think about communication, it's actually 3 components of communication. You have words, you have tone, and you have body language. When we look at words are only 7% of communication. Tone, 38%. Yeah, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Body language, 55% of communication. That's right, 55%. It carries a weight how you present yourself. Now, if I came in this morning and I said, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? We're going to talk about customer service. you would probably log off. I don't want to hear this. But it's the words that match the tone, that match the body language. So when you're talking to your customer, even in a virtual setting, and I know that sometimes we're able to hide behind the camera now because we don't even turn on cameras anymore. So we're like, oh my goodness, what are they thinking? How are they responding to what I'm saying? Well, we have to then depend wholly or more so on the tone. How are they saying this? And then to get clarity, what I want to do is I want to ask probing questions. I want to make sure that I'm understanding or I'm interpreting the message in the way that it was sent. Empathy does just that. Empathy does not assume. Empathy asks. So when we're talking about listening, one of the things that I mentioned a little bit earlier is our need to ensure that we are actively listening. We're actively listening and not just waiting for our moment to interject. Because let me tell you, when you have something good to say, you're like, oh, give me my turn, give me my turn, give me my turn. And I get it. I get it. When we feel as though we are right about something, or we feel as though we have the answer to something, we dismiss everyone else and we tune in on our turn. I think it was Stephen Covey, who said, we must listen to understand, not listen to respond. And when we listen to respond, we're then negating everything that the person is saying. And honestly, we don't hear it. We're not actively listening. But when we listen to understand, there are some things that we do here. Our body language is attentive. We tend to lean in to what they're saying. We ask probing questions like, who did you get that information from? Where are you going next with this? When should we plan for this? Why do you feel that way? How can I help you with this? The probing questions tend to want or seek more information rather than assume. And when we seek more information and we verify information, it builds our level of communication, and actually it adds value to the conversation. Also, the ability to paraphrase. Now, here's one of the things that happens when you're talking to someone and you ask them a question like, so what did I say? I don't want to know what I said. I want to know what you heard. So I ask questions like, tell me what you heard. That lets me know if the listener or the receiver has indeed interpreted the message how I need them to interpret it. So we got to make sure that we respect the pause. And when we respect the pause, then we allow the person to come in and we allow them to engage in the conversation. And we also allow the listener to engage with silence and with inner interpretation. Now, I'm going to go to one more slide, and then I'm going to stop for a second because I want to hear from you. I want to do something a little different here. So many times as presenters, we are focused on making sure that we get our message across. But I'm finding that the more I engage the audience, the better I understand the audience's needs, and I'm able to chime in and give them information accordingly. So Susan, I'm going to depend heavily on you to give me the questions that are in the chat, and then I'm going to answer those questions accordingly. I'm used to being in the hot seat, so don't worry about it. Just ask your questions. This is the safe space for you. When we talk about emotional intelligence, as I am definitely shifting into that, notice we talked about communication, we talked about empathy. Now we're moving into emotional intelligence, and all of them are intertwined. Emotional intelligence is what guides us in identifying and managing our emotions. Sometimes when I'm teaching this particular topic, people are thinking that it means the absence of emotion. Like I'm just not supposed to show up in the workplace with emotion. I'm emotionless. That's not what I want. I need you to understand that emotional intelligence is not the absence of emotion. It is the control of emotion. It is your ability to not speak even when you know that you can. Now, one of the things that's not on my bio is I have a 17-year-old daughter, and she's pretty awesome. She's the last one. If you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Excited. She's the last one. She's graduating this year. I'm super excited for her. And as I'm teaching her emotional intelligence, one of the things that I say to her is this: Serenity, just because you can say it doesn't mean you need to. How do you tell a 17-year-old who knows everything that?
That's
Well,
so funny, Kashana, because I was thinking the whole time you were talking earlier, I'm like, this applies not only to customers, but to when you're talking to teenagers.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Susan. It doesn't just impact us in our workplace, it impacts us also at home. And honestly, when you begin to work on who you are personally, it just flows over into every other area of your life. So, telling her that, she's thinking like, why? But I have so much to say, and I'm so right. I need to say this. And what I have to share with her is, one of the beauties about emotional intelligence is that it is self control. How amazing is it when you know you had the power to make someone's world crash, but you take the time to say, is it worth it? It's not. That's, to me, the beauty of being meek and the beauty of humility. It's understanding that the control that I have over what I say and how I say it makes me who I am. So when you're thinking about emotional intelligence, I invite you rather to engage in the control and the discipline of your tongue. Ooh, we're going to jump into this a little bit more. We're going to go a little bit deeper. But before I do that, Susan, I want to make sure that if we have questions, that I answer any questions about anything I've already said to this point.
None so far. I think everybody's intently listening to you as you're instructing.
Awesome, awesome. I will take it. I will take it. But again, I invite you to the chat. So if there's something that you want to know or something that you have a question on, please don't hesitate to ask. I will make sure that I get it answered for you.
Or
So
even raise your hand if you feel like you need to ask the question rather than typing it, because I know I do that sometimes. So I'm happy
no,
to do hand raising answers too.
awesome, awesome. I love it. I love it. So let's get more into this emotional intelligence thing. Now, you may see it presented as EI or EQ. And what I'm seeing now more in organizations as I work with them is that they're moving from IQ to EQ. They're saying, listen, I know that we've searched for people who were highly intelligent and had this educational background and all of this experience per se, but what we want is people who are able to actually engage in the culture. They found out that people with a low EQ, unfortunately, were not engaged, and they ended up being a conflict in their culture and causing conflict in their culture. We see here that people have not only looked for a value, a value, as we would call it, a value add or a culture fit. They're now looking for a culture add, and I say you need both and. You need someone who fits in the culture as well as someone who adds to the culture. So we want to make sure that we keep this in mind for those of you who are HR professionals, making sure that as you are interviewing someone, you ask them those behavioral questions to ensure that they are a good add to your organization. So I'm going to give you these 5 core elements of emotional intelligence, and they are: the first one is self-awareness. Now, I love talking about this simply because it is a check on you. Self-awareness is simply looking in the mirror naked. I know it's crazy. But when you do, what you find is there are things about me that no one else knows. There are things about me that no one else sees except me. Now, we're living in a culture that highlights people who do great all the time. Oh, you're so awesome. Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, you're so this. And so what ends up happening is we've elevated our greatness so much that we tend not to focus on the things that are not so great about us. I know it's counterculture, but I want you to take a look at those things. Because sometimes what we find is I'm not so nice to people. I'm not so patient with people. When I am in a situation where my back is against the wall, I come out and I'm fighting because I feel like I am under attack. When we take a look at the things that are not so great, it allows us to then dissect them and really get into them and find out what caused the issue. What I'm seeing now more in the workplace is we are dealing more with the fruit of issues instead of the root of issues. When we're talking about leading effectively, a good leader is self-aware. If you're going from job to job, or if you're doing different things and you're finding it doesn't work, or the people just don't like me everywhere I go, well, here's what I want you to consider. You are the common denominator. Oops, I know, don't tell me that. You are. You are the person that is constantly going to these different places with you. Are you self-aware enough to say, there are some things that I need to work on in me? I know you're amazing. I'm not taking that away from you, but you're not perfect. And that's the human side of you. And it's okay. So self-awareness is a part of emotional intelligence. The second element is self-regulation. Now, I talked a little bit about how or emotional intelligence is self-control. Well, self-regulation is definitely a part of that, as it talks about redirecting your disruptive emotions and impulses and adapting to changing circumstances. What does that mean? It means that I have the ability to disrupt an emotion and then redirect myself and make sure that I am targeted to a positive emotion. This takes a lot of self-control. It takes a lot of self-control. It takes a lot of ability to understand what your options are. Because if you're going to disrupt a thought, you have to know what your options are in order to redirect it. I was thinking about how, in terms of redirection, how important it is to make sure that we are aware of what emotion we are dealing with at the time. Now, I just learned this recently because I grew up thinking that if you felt a certain way, you're always angry. Like, I'm angry at you. I'm angry at you. We would throw anger, or we would throw that emotion in an anger bucket. Well, recently, I found out that I wasn't angry about everything. I was just taught to default to anger. And so I was talking to my husband one day, and he said, well, what's going on? And I said, well, you know what? Give me some time to process this. And my husband is a talker. He loves to communicate. And I'm like, I need processing time. I need processing time. And then she said, well, how much time do you need? And I'm thinking, well, okay, give me 48 hours. I thought I was going to get away with that. He's like, oh, no. 48 hours is too long. And I said, okay, give me 24. And as I was processing that morning, I woke up and it's like it came to me. I wasn't angry. I was disappointed. How many of us are defaulting to an emotion because that's all you've known, and you haven't sought other emotions to be able to redirect? Self-regulation allows you to do that. It allows you to process the emotion and make sure that it is the right direction or the right emotion that you are directing your frustration or your anger or whatever behavior to. So I want to make sure that I invite you to understand how powerful self-regulation is and how powerful it is to be able to identify the correct emotion. The third element is motivation. Do you know what motivates you? Now, sometimes we are thinking money motivates me, or, there are different things that we see surface-wise that motivate people. And here's what I want you to understand about that. Everyone is not motivated the same way. You have some people who are motivated intrinsically and some people who are motivated extrinsically. There are some people who say, hey, if you give me an extra $500 on my check, Yes, I'll come. And there are some people who say, just recognize the work that I've done. Just give me credit. You need to know that about the customers that you're working with. Because if you're thinking that they're motivated by this and they're really not, then you tend to lose the connection. And when you lose the connection, you lose the experience. The next core element is empathy. I won't stay there long because we've talked about empathy. And I know that you understand the difference between empathy and sympathy. We're now going to make room for people. We're now going to make sure that we're communicating and hearing what they're saying and not just waiting to interject. The last core value is social skill. Now, this is a powerful, powerful element where it is the ability to gain rapport with others, to build good relationships, and to move relationships in the desired direction. Now, what I want to share with you about social skill is one of the things that I have observed in meetings and conferences or workshops that I've been in and had the wonderful privilege of being the keynote or speaker in, is people who say things and have not scanned the room. Yes. I know. I'm thinking, oh, that was, I'm thinking, I'm like, look at my face, look at my body language. And unfortunately, people will say things and they're not culturally aware or situationally aware. And when you have social skill, you are able to navigate the room. You are able to navigate the people in the room, the personalities in the room, the communication styles in the room, the culture in the room, and you're able to do whatever needs to be done in order to navigate the conversation or to build rapport. Now, as I was sharing with you a little earlier, just because it can be said does not necessarily mean it should be said. And your ability to control your tongue in that particular moment can lead you to great success. When you're able to take a conversation out of the public and make it private, that indicates social skill. Or do you need to be right? Do you need to show everyone that you know what you're talking about? I run into that more times than not, where people are trying to prove themselves. And so they say something that actually disqualifies them from promotion, or they say something that disqualifies them for a raise. We got to make sure that we have social skill. And when you have social skill, you actually have political savvy. That's something different. I won't get into that because it's a little bit about executive presence. And I believe that political savvy is so very important because it's understanding who's in the room and how to navigate the power in the room. This is what I want you to remember. The loudest person in the room does not necessarily have the power or the authority. They may have the power, but they don't have the authority. Two different things. Power is influence. Authority has the signature. It actually gives the stamp or the confirmation. All right, let's keep going. So I want to give you today 6 ways to develop your communication standards. But before I give you that, I want to go to Susan. Susan, or is there anything that I can answer for anyone that's in the chat that may have a question or want to engage? I am here for you this morning.
Yeah, everybody I think is intently listening, as I said before, because and I think your presentation is very clear. So no questions so far. Is there anything out there if anybody wants Kashana, maybe not a question, but to elaborate on more or kind of move in a different direction in the way, then throw that in there. Oh,
And I believe, yes,
somebody said, Sade said, everything is so clear and informative. So,
hey, good. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Sade. I definitely appreciate that. And this is a platform where we can have cross information. So if you have information that you want to share, please don't hesitate to do that. I definitely welcome that as well. All right, well, let's get back into it. So I want to give you 6 ways to develop your communication standards. Now, when we're thinking about this, again, when we're talking about customers, every industry, their customer base is very diverse. And we got to make sure that as a customer experience representative, that we are inclusive. What do I mean by that? People come from different backgrounds, different experiences. And because they do, they have different communication styles. They have different ways to handle conflict. They have different ways to share information. So if we're going to develop our communication style, we have to understand the diversity of our customer base. Okay. So as we're going through this, I want you to gravitate to ways that you can actually develop your communication standards, at least take one or two away and say, I'm going to incorporate this into my everyday. So number one, have deep knowledge on the topic. Okay. When I'm speaking to a customer service representative, one of the things that I am not fond of is when someone says, I don't know how to do that. I'm thinking, what? The reason why is because I feel as though you have now cut the conversation. You've basically said, I don't know how to help you. I don't want to help you. You figure it out. And in that interpretation, it leads me to believe that I'm not important to you. When you say, I don't know how to do that, it just really kind of, again, isolates the customer and makes the customer feel as though you're not engaged. So here's what we can say in replacement of that particular statement. I'm unsure of how to handle this request. However, let me get someone who can help you. Or give me 24 hours to see if I can figure out what you need. Or here's the information that you need in order to solve this issue. Unfortunately, I don't have the credentials to handle that. Do you see how that sounds a little bit different than I don't know how to do that? And I'm like, so what do I do? Don't just leave me here. I feel like you left me. Come back. We got to make sure that when the customer has a need and we cannot provide the response or answer, that we do everything we can to make sure the customer still has a great experience. Got to make sure that we have deep knowledge on the topic in which we were hired for. And here's a hint. If you don't know, find out and ask someone, can you be cross-trained? It's not that you want to take anyone's job. Stay in your lane, but also know what the other parties are doing. Also know what the other, your coworkers, what their jobs are in terms of understanding how your job is incorporated into their job, because you are a piece of the whole. Okay, so have deep knowledge on the topic. Number two, resist aggressive behavior. I know. People try to take you outside of your character, but here's what I want you to understand. You choose your behavior. Uh-oh, this is going to get me in trouble. But yes, I got to tell you, you choose your behavior. If you say someone made you punch a hole in the wall, or someone made you curse them out, or someone made you do something, you've given them too much power. When you understand that you choose your behavior, then it shifts the dynamic of the situation or the conversation. When you understand how to have or incorporate self-regulation, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the way I'm thinking about this. I'm going to shift this disruptive behavior into something positive and just not say anything for a moment until I'm able to collect my emotion. That makes a difference. I had this conversation yesterday, and I really work hard to practice what I preach, which is why I'm so passionate about things like this. But and someone, they were saying something via email, and I mean, it was coming across so strongly. So, and I'm thinking, oh my, and I mean, I could feel my body responding. If you ever been angry, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like you feel the heat and it's rising up your neck. You're like, ooh, I can just eat you alive right now. And because I felt like that, I knew I needed to stay away from the conversation. And this email came across, and it was CC'd by someone in a higher position. And I said, okay, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do here? Because what do? You have to respond. You can't not respond. But I understood that how I responded was everything. And so what I did was I responded to the subject matter, not to the behavior. I knew that I needed to address the issue, not attack the person. And it wasn't the right environment for me to do that. And understanding that is a part of emotional intelligence as well.
I have a question for you, Krishana.
Sure, sure.
What if it's the flip? What if you write an email and you don't mean to come off angry, but for whatever reason, person that receives the email feels like it was curt or not something that you intended? Is there a way to fix that?
No, I love that you asked that, Susan, and you're absolutely right, because the way people receive a message can definitely impact the relationship. And you, as the sender, you may have sent the message, but there are barriers and determining factors in how the receiver in or decoded the message. So what I'm saying is you encoded it, the message is here, but the way they decoded the message, there was something that happened here that impacted the way the message was decoded. A couple of things could be happening here. Number one, they misinterpreted the tone of the email. That's one thing. Number two, they could have something going on personally that impacted how they decoded the email. Number three, they don't like you.
Nothing you can do about that.
And here's the thing about that. Sometimes what we're finding in the workplace, and I see this more times than not, is people come into the workplace with unhealed trauma. And so they're looking at Susan, but Susan reminds them of the bully that they had in the 6th grade. And so now they're imposing their emotion or emoting now on Susan when Susan doesn't know what she's like. I just asked you to take out the trash, so what is going on? So you have to make sure that conversation becomes a phone conversation or an in-person conversation. Because if you are missing the tone, or if they are missing the tone, it's important that we pick up the phone and we make sure that it's clarified. So still have the conversation, definitely have the conversation, but make sure that the way that you have the conversation shifts. I like that. Thank you. Intention is important, but we got to make sure that we also recognize that intention can be good, but impact can be bad. So what do we need to do to shift the impact? Good stuff. I love it. Okay. Cross-train. Again, I mentioned this in the first one. Have deep knowledge on the topic. If you don't have deep knowledge on the topic, that's perfectly fine. But make sure that you get someone to help you understand the processes. They help you understand the organization so that you can make sure that you show up in the right way. Number 4, establish a network across agencies. And when I talk about agencies, I'm talking about companies and organizations as well. You would love to know if I have a connect in the BBB, and now I can make sure that your business is, accredited, and I can say, hey, call Susan for this. You want to be that person that understands how to network and how to build the relationship by referring them to someone else. One of the best things I've learned is that's not in my scope, but let me give you someone who can take care of you. Let me tell you, it works. It's a good thing. Number 5, do what you promise. Do what you promise. If you tell your customer that you're going to do something, the way you build credibility is to do it. Follow up and follow through. Follow up and follow through. If you say, I'm going to call you tomorrow at 10 o'clock, set your alarm if you have to. Everything is on my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it does not exist. So make sure that you follow up and you follow through, because that's what's important to your customer. Did you know that increase in communication leads to increase in trust? Your customer wants to trust you. And if they can't trust you, they will do business elsewhere. So today I want you to think about that. What are some things that I can do to ensure my customer knows that they can trust me? I'm going to pause right here for just a second. Susan, I'm just going to check in with you to see if there are any questions that I can answer or any information anyone wants to share along the way.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. Everybody, everybody is, I think, clear and ready to go. But yes,
Good.
please, if you just want to even comment in the chat, that's awesome. We love to have interaction.
That's perfectly fine. No, I like to make sure that I'm including the audience and making sure that whatever it is that you need, we address today, especially when it comes to customer service. Like I said, this can be a whole class. So I want to make sure that that I know I'm moving really quickly, but the information that I'm providing is something that is relating to you and that you can definitely apply it to your everyday.
Susan, hi, I'm Z. I have a question and I hope it's quick. So I wanted to ask, like with customers, and we're talking about trust, and they do trust you. And then they get into another conversations that, it can be time consuming. How do you redirect that and not feel rude? But because time is, and I hate to say it like this, but time is money.
It is.
So if you have allotted, like, and I'm in a tax business, so I have allotted my time for the next client. How do you get out of it? Because it makes me always run late sometimes, and I don't want to be rude.
Yes,
How
absolutely. Oh, Z, I love that. I love that question. And you are
I
so
need
right.
yeah, I do too. But when I tell you,
it becomes difficult, right? Because you want to take care of the person in front of you. So one of the things I would recommend, and I teach this in time management as well, one of the things I would recommend is let people know that you have allotted a certain time for them. So we'll be here for 30 minutes and I will honor your time because I do make sure that I set this time aside so that we can share and talk about whatever needs to be discussed in that time frame. That's one thing. And then if they're talking about a story or something, let's just say you're not done with the business. I'm going to talk about this from two sides. If you're not done with the business at hand, bring them back to what the business is at hand. Say, oh my goodness, I can understand how that can be frustrating. What I want to do is make sure again that I honor your time. So I'm going to stick with the list today. But I tell you, if you want to schedule some more time with me and we talk about everything else that's going on outside of this, then you're welcome to do that. Now, trust me, they will do it. So be careful about saying that or giving them that option. And then another way is to, if they're talking and the time is going over, just make sure that they understand, I would love to talk. I do have another appointment that I got to get to, but thank you so much for your time. We are welcome to, schedule another time, go on my website or whatever the case may be, and we can discuss this in detail. But right now, let's make sure that we go ahead and finalize this information so that I can honor my next client's time as well and get to them on time.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to use my Kashana voice when I say that. I'm going to practice that to the T. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Welcome, Stephen. It's my honor. No, and I will say this, sometimes when you're working with customers, because they're used to you being in a relaxed, state, and you're like, oh, you're because you want them to feel comfortable, right? And so you're just kind of like chummy with them and like, oh yeah, da da da. But when you shift your voice into your professional voice, as my friends call it, the coaching voice, when you shift your voice and the tone, then they feel like, okay, well, something else is happening here and I need to shift. So you're going to have to shift in order for them to shift. Good stuff. Thank you, Z. I appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. All right. Let's keep it going. I only have a few more minutes with you. I want to make sure I maximize my moment here. So, okay. Give the customer what they need. Now, here's one of the things that we see or hear often. The customer is always right. Now, you know, and I know, the customer is not always right. we say that, but the customer is not always right. What we want to do is we want the customer to perceive that they are right. Therefore, we use language that helps them to understand that, you know, we are with them in this thing. We have empathetic, we are our empathy, we're empathetically listening. All of those things we want the customer to feel. And so we have to understand what the customer needs. Don't assume, ask. Now, I know you're probably saying, well, Kashana, that's a little contrary to what you said earlier, because you said to make sure that I assume the needs of the customer, that I do the Q&As and things like that. And I'm not taking away from that, but I want to make sure that we complement that we say, okay, I'm going to provide the customer with what I think they need. And I'm also going to ask the customer what they need. One of the things about expectations is we put a lot of expectations on people that we have not communicated. Think about it. You have expectations all the time that no one knows about. You just say, well, they should know. Did you tell them? No. No one is reading your mind. So if the customer is expecting something, you may want to ask them, what is your expectation? Or you may want to set the expectation for the customer, which is even better because that allows you to control the narrative. If you say, well, here's what you can expect in the next 24 hours, or here's what you can expect in the next week. We want to make sure that we set the expectations, because if we don't set the expectations, the customer thinks that they can't trust us, or that we've forgotten about them, or that we're just not engaged. So let's make sure that we always set those expectations. And again, we don't assume, we ask questions. Address the customer's concern. The customer wants to be taken seriously. They want to be listened to. They want to be respected. They want to receive a quick response. You have Alexa and you have Siri and you have all of these things that allow you to put alarms in their systems to remind you of what to do. Don't leave the reminders, don't just mark them out. Use them to your benefit. Use them to your benefit. Put an alarm on your phone that says a reminder to call, Z. You want to make sure that whatever you have as a resource, you use it. You use it, because I hear a lot of people say, well, I forgot to call them. Well, if you told them you were going to call them back in 2 hours, set an alarm. If you said, give me tomorrow, sometimes I like to tell people, be more specific. Tomorrow by close of business. And then what time is your close of business? Because your close of business can be different from my close of business. So make sure that you are very specific about that. Whatever the customer needs, don't take it lightly, take it seriously, and make sure that even though you may find it, not important, they think it's important. Now, when we do this, sometimes this brings conflict. What I will tell you about conflict is not all conflict can be resolved. Some conflict just needs to be managed. And I say that because we can definitely feel like we are not getting it, that we're not getting through. Well, you're trying to resolve things and it's not resolvable. The only person that you can change is you. That's it. You can't change someone else. And for that reason, we've got to then learn how to manage the conflict. When we look at our conflict styles, they are the 5: accommodation, compromise, collaboration, avoidance, and competition. When you understand your own conflict style, it helps you to deal better with the customer, because then you understand, if I'm an accommodator, which means I'm a people pleaser, then my customer comes and they're let's say a competitor, and they're telling me they want this, they want that, they want this. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to balance that out. I need to be able to say, I want to help you. Here's what I can do. Okay, so that's what an accommodator would say. They would put the options before the customer that is making demands to make sure that the customer feels like they still have the power. because that's what competitors do. They want to win. They want to win. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that they win within the scope of what I can do. You never want the customer to tell you what they want you to do, because when they tell you what they want you to do, they can make up stuff that you can't do. So always, always have those options available. All right, here we are. We're at the end of our presentation, and I am excited that I had an opportunity.